The Ines Raya build. So we don't have any of the current Transcendent mods, but for anyone that just got Ines Raya and is looking for a build, I'm going to show you how to take her from this
This is going to sting a little.
to this.
You can't escape.
Let's get into it. So, first things first, I'm just gonna get this out the way early. For the components and reactors, for components, we're going with the Slayer set to boost this skill power. And for the reactor, she has two sets of abilities, right? Singular and tech. We're gonna build into the singular, and I'll explain why. You can go with either one. I go electric singular because her strongest ability happens to be a singular one, so I want to get that boosted. Here we have skill critical hit rate and skill duration. Honestly, I would go with critical hit damage and another boost to electricity because that's just going to give you the most bang for your buck here. You don't need to build into skill critical hit rate, but I just haven't farmed for a reactor for her yet. So if you're looking for a reactor, I am optimally am going to go skill, critical hit damage, and then a boost for electricity. That's going to give you the max amount of damage for most scenarios, not just specific to bosses. You could have another one depending on if you have unlimited patience for grinding, then you could go the route of getting the Colossi one for Colossi damage as well. But honestly, critical hit damage and electrocution is going to be a good bet for this. All right, so when we jump into her mods, again, we don't have a Transcendent mod for her yet. We're going to unlock those, and then I'm going to give you an update on what this build looks like with a specific Transcendent mods that she has. So you have two possible options, and we're going to have builds for these as well, or I'll tell you how to tweak the build. But honestly, the build itself is absolutely cracked. So this basically will drop the critical hit rate thing that I just showed you. And then it's going to create a plasma barrier around her. So we'll see what that actually looks like. And then time of the hunting grounds, it changes to a skill that quickly dashes towards the enemy. So this is similar to Keelan. And it deals damage and inflicts conductor on all enemies in her path, reduces the number of bounces of chain lightning, and modifies it to a stackable. Okay, so it reduces the bounce, but it stacks the damage. And modifies the arcade type of the modified skill to tech. So, okay, so this is interesting. So that's going to be for a later one. This is if you just unlocked her, you want to build, it's going to be OP off the bat. So we're building this off of multi-talented because singular and tech. So for her tech skill, if you use that, you're going to get a boost in her effect range, which her abilities all have an effect range boost of potentially 200%, or again, 100% on top of her base 100. So we're going to go with expansion to get you 92% of the way there with a backing of 8%. If you use one of her tech abilities first, because you remember you can only use one of these buffs at a time, then you're going to get over to the max range. So if you use her 4, you're going to get a really good range here. If you use singular, then you're going to get an all attribute damage of 30% boost. This is really why we're using multi-talented, right? Because again, singular is her strongest ability. So, and that's her 3. Her 3 is multiplied by 3,600% on your skill power. So, let's look at what these abilities are, and then I'll jump into the rest of the build here. But you can see it here if you just want to take a screenshot and skip all of the other stuff. So, starting with her 1. Her 1 is Chain Lightning. It's what I was using just now. And it's exactly what it looks like, right? You're going to jump into it. It's going to chain across a number of different people. And what that, it bounces up to 7 times and moves extremely fast, by the way. So this is going to be your skill power times 200%. And then the effect range is going to be your effect range, skill effect range, divided by 0.4 or 40%. So the conductor, all of these are going to add the conductor modifier to your enemies, and the conductor just adds a skill power times 51%. So every time you do one of your abilities and a person already has conductor, then that ability is going to have that additional multiplier. So you're going to see how this starts to stack up, right? Her number 2 is lightning conductor, right? This creates current coils around enemies to deal damage, right? So the coils themselves create a damage of skill power multiplied by 421%, and the additional damage from conductor is skill power times 106%. So if they already have conductor, it's skill power times 530%. You see how it starts to stack? All right, it starts to get really, 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 really interesting. Her number 3, and that's the one that I just mentioned, right? This is called discharge. She's going to power up and shoot a charge mainly directly in front of her. Everyone that is hit by that is going to get that skill power multiplied by 3,600%, almost 3,700%, with an additional damage multiplier. If they are already hit by conductor, you get another skill power times 920%. Y'all, this boosts this ability, if they have conductor, to roughly 4,500% multiplied by the skill power. That is why this is so powerful, right? And conductor is so important. All right, her 4, right? Her 4 is called Snare Hunter, right? This is a massive AoE, and this is really why we're doing the expandable range thing. Again, they're all 200%. The ones that can be increased are all 200%. So this one creates an area of effect, boom, that just that does an insane amount of damage, y'all. Like, you look, that's one ability. This is one ability, and it, oh man. So we increase the effect range on that, right? So with Snare Hunter, it creates that AoE called Plasma Acceleration Coil, and creates Thunder Snare. Thunder Snare lasts 10 seconds, but we kind of have an increase with our duration. You don't really need that. And the continuous damage is skill power times 52, with a damage interval of every 0.5 seconds. So every second they get hit twice by this, right? At a skill power times 52%. And the continuous damage range with our increase in show you the build again later, but it ends up being 14, almost 15 meters. All right. Short circuit is also, when using this skill, it grants short circuit. While short circuit is active, dark current deals damage at a max damage rate. Okay, and I'll explain what that means in a second. And it also inflicts conductor. All of our abilities inflict conductor, right? So if you use any of the abilities and then you stack the ability on the other one, you're going to get that damage boost of conductor. The only one that doesn't get that is the initial ability. Unless you're using this one, you'll notice that when you use it initially, you'll get a certain number, and then that number will get a little bit higher as time goes by, because now the people that are still alive are being inflicted by conductor. So, with short circuit, the duration again is another 10 seconds, and your movement speed is increased by 50%. So when you use this ability, you start to move faster. And the current coils themselves have a max range of 30 meters, and they do skill power times 65%, right? With a max target amount of 3 monsters, damage interval 2.4. So the closer to the center of this ability, the faster they're being damaged, but they have continuous damage a little bit lower. If they're in there, there's 2 circles. You see this, the main circle and then the larger circle. So the main circle inside of that is going to be damage times your skill power times 52 at a damage interval of every 0.5 seconds. So they get hit twice every second. And then if they're in the outer circle, they're still being damaged at a little bit higher at skill power times 65%, but they're getting hit once every 2.5 seconds with a max damage count of 3 monsters. So there is a kind of a limiter there. So if we scroll down here, the damage addition with conductor is only 16%. So this is going to be an ability that does a lot of AoE damage over time, but it's not the most powerful, right? That's what we have our 3 for. Her passive is Plasma Oscillation. So her skill critical hit rate, and this is what we really want to build through. Her skill critical hit rate increases as max MP increases. All right. So it's going to be your max MP times 6.5%. And that is going to be in addition to your critical hit rate. And it's very easy, y'all. It is very easy. You don't need, right now, she's super OP. You do not need to do a lot of building. You don't need to use enlightenment or any of that. You don't need any additional damage or skill critical hit rate boosts to get to max, right? She's the crit queen. So you're going to have 100% crit very easily with this. But all of these other things, right? So on the critical hit, when you have a critical hit, then you get an MP hero trigger rate of 5% with MP amount of 5% and a dark current trigger rate. Remember, we talked about dark current of 100%. So when you crit, you're going to trigger dark current, and on fire harm critical hit, you're going to get you're just going to get a dark current a trigger rate of 10%. All right, so dark current, there's a lot of math here. What it means is you're going to get an additional damage output when you trigger any crit. All right, and is this going to be the difference maker? Not really, but it does kind of help, right? When it comes to your third ability or your fourth ability, because it starts to add to your fourth ability. But for all the other ones, you're not really going to get a huge benefit from my understanding. So the build itself, we again, like I mentioned, we're starting with multi-talented. You could use a dangerous ambush if you want to get that 50% boost on the colossi when they're knocked down and stuff like that. But honestly, I prefer multi-talented because when we're using our singular ability, we're going to get a 30% boost in our damage output for 5 seconds, and you can kind of re-trigger this consistently. What I tend to do is use my 1 ability, which is singular, and then I use my 3 ability for massive, massive damage. So 1, and then your 3 for massive amounts of damage, right? Because again, that 3 is the one that starts to stack. And not only are we going to add the conductor's state to everyone with the 1, which gives us that additional boost, so we're maximizing, but now we also get another massive amount of boost to our 3 ability with another 30% on top of that. So that's kind of the starting point here. We're doing all of the boost mods, so skill concentration, skill insight, frontlines, emergency measures, the usual suspects. I actually opted for the focus mods. Again, we're building into singular, so I went focus on singular, focus on electric to boost those abilities and get that additional cooldown. She already has pretty low cooldowns, but I like the idea of being able to spam some of these abilities. That's why I go nimble fingers, the focus on mods, and it allows us to do our 1 every 4 seconds, our 2 every 6 seconds, our 3 every roughly 10 seconds, and our 4 there's 2 stacks of it every 18 seconds. So it does drop all of these things. Another thing to note about Ines uses a potent energy type and MP. So 2 of her abilities use the potent energy type and 2 of them use MP. So her 1 and her 2 use MP. Her 3 and her 4 use plasma, which is her potent energy type. It's called plasma. So whenever you damage an enemy with your abilities, you build this plasma bar, and that's what you see at the very bottom here. That red is her plasma bar. And you'll notice that if I'm using my 1 and my 2, the MP cost is being used, but if I'm using my 3 or my 4, the plasma cost is being used. So what does this mean? This means that this character, I'm telling you, she's OP. This character is very easy to use when it comes to massively spamming abilities, because while there's a natural cooldown, and I do think it's important to have that cooldown for my build, you're not going to really run into an issue where your MP is being drained so quickly or your plasma, because you're constantly switching between the MP cost abilities and her plasma cost abilities. So this is going to be really easy to spam across, right? I'm always going to start with my 1,
This is going to sting.
maybe the 2, use the 3, and then drop the 4 whenever you have
Let's end this.
a chance, because they do stack a little bit, right?
Keep trying.
And then it just becomes, look at this, I'm just using all of my abilities and it just becomes insane, yo. Like her abilities are absolutely cracked, right? So finishing up, we're Nimble Fingers expansion and the boost in HP. You could, if you don't want to go for, you know, the dock on max shield, you could just use any other MP mod. I mean HP mod, except for Stim. You don't want to knock down any of her MP. You know, you don't necessarily need to use mods to improve her MP, but you definitely don't want to knock down her MP either, because that's what's going to allow you to have this max 100%, right? So if we remove all of the critical hit rate stuff here, so say I use this, right? I just put this, I'm going to remove that so I remove all of her mods. Now her base with just the MP that I have is 44. So she starts with 44, y'all. But then, and even like, look, I removed the reactor that has the boost in critical hit rate. If I go to the build that I have, if I just switch over, wait, I'm in combat. It's saying I'm in combat. I got to back up a little bit. So if I go to the build that I created, that I just showed y'all, I instantly hit max, right? And I don't have anything that adds MP aside from my components. I don't have anything that adds MP. It's just her based MP modifier, and the components, no mods at all, right? So you're automatically going to have this trigger rate. So you do not need to add additional stuff to it, y'all. That's the build so far, right? We just jumped in, we just got her, we just unlocked her. Hopefully that makes sense as far as like how she works and how the MP boost works and all of that fun stuff. Her Transcendent mods are going to significantly change how this build is set up. But if you don't have the Transcendent mods yet and you just want to build her to be an absolute beast, here it is right here, right? Again, as always, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Did you go with this? Did you not go with this? I'm sure that there's a ton of other creators that are showing you their builds, and a lot of these builds are all going to be similar, slightly different. Everyone has their own perspectives. Personally, I don't care. All of these are really realistically OP, and you're just gonna go have a lot of fun with them. There's a lot of trade-offs with this build, and I think that this is gonna be a really fun way to experiment with her. So we're gonna take her into some bosses and some different game modes, and we're gonna experiment to see how this holds up against a lot of the other stuff when we go live a little bit later today. So see you guys on the next one.